Welcome back to JP's Budget Collecting and our weekly look back at the hot comics from 6 months ago. This week we're looking back at the hot comics from August 14th, 2020, and I'm recording this on February 12th, 2021. As always, what we're doing here is trying to understand what made these books hot 6 months ago, what factors have affected their pricing since, did they stay hot, did they fall back some, so that we all make better decisions about which books we chase and which books we're patient on. As always, we're looking back at the hot comics from the CBSI Hot Top 10 and the Comic Tom Key Collector Hottest Trending Comics of the Week. So this week we got 17 books that we're going to talk about. So without further ado, let's dig into the books, see if we can learn anything, and see if, we just need to be patient or if some of these books we should have chased at the time. So let's get started with, as always, option news. So option news is going to be our first thing this week. And first up, we have Tron #1 from the 2006 series. And basically, this hit the list because there was rumors that a new Tron movie was in production with Jared Leto attached. Back then, it caused this series to jump up to $25 to $30. Now it's a $1 to $10 book. There were two sales in the last 3 months where it actually somebody might pay $20 and somebody else would pay $25, but for the most part this has been literally a $1 to $10 book. So this one is way down. Not much going on. There hasn't been any news lately with the third Tron movie. Part of it could have been because of COVID, the production has slowed down or whatever, but this is pretty typical. You get a little news, people chase a book, no news for a while, and it falls back in price. Speaking of which, we're going to talk about RIPT #1. This is movie rumors again, and I say again because this book has hit the list several times over the last couple of years since it came out in 2018, because it had been optioned, and then there was rumors it was going into production and all this kind of stuff. And this book has been on and off the list probably 4 or 5 times at least. And back then it would jump back up to a $10 to $15 book. A 9.8 went for $140, and now it's a book that's not selling. The most recent sale for a first print #1 that wasn't a set of the whole series was for $30 way back in November, which is up. And all the listings right now are $25 to $35 or more, but nobody's buying them. Literally nobody's buying them. The last sale for 9.8 was clear back in August. There are some 9.8s listed. I don't know if people have finally just learned that, yeah, this book is just not worth chasing, but or just not worth chasing at the price people are asking, but this book is just not selling. So with that, we're going to move on to Reborn #1, and this is another, this series was basically optioned by Netflix, and that Sandra Bullock was attached to making a Netflix movie out of this, caused this book to jump up to $15. Now it's still a $5 to $10 book. 9.8. A 9.8 went for $40, but that's literally the only 9.8 sale in the last 3 months. So yeah, this one is another one that's kind of crashed back down. There's not a lot of interest right now. There's not any recent news. So people just aren't chasing it right now. With that, we're going to move into our one cover of the week. And that is Dark Knight's Death Metal #3, the Federici variant with Robin King on the cover, looking like, I think everybody says Ozzy Osbourne. This book was red hot coming out back in the summer. Everybody was jumping on the Robin King as he was going to be the next Batman Who Laughs kind of thing. Back then it was going for $20 to $25. Pre-sales of 9.8 to this book were going for $120. Yeah, I didn't think this would last because it wasn't actually his first. It was just a cool cover, and it didn't. It's now a $5 to $10 book. 9.8 can be had for $30 to $50. Yeah, this one is way back down. Just don't know that Robin King actually played that important role in the Death Metal series. I didn't read it, so I can't say, but I haven't heard anybody talk about Robin King in months. And as a result, this book has come way back. With that, we're going to move into Comic Buzz, which we got a ton of Comic Buzz related stuff this week. And first up is TMNT, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles #1, the second print. So first print was getting out of reach for everybody. People had started jumping on the third print because it's a little more common, but the second print was jumping in price, or has over the last year. Back then, raw copies were going for around 1,500. A 7.0 went for 21.25, which is kind of what prompted this on the list. That's actually the last 7.0 sale. Now, raw copies are still in that $1,500 to $2,000 range. 7.5 recently went for $2,250. 9.0 recently went for $3,720. So this book is, I would call this pretty steady. It hasn't been a lot of gains in the last 6 months on this, but still just a fantastic book, a fantastic series, and everything TMNT has been climbing in price over the last year, and this is no exception. Next, we're going to have another TMNT book. This is TMNT 104, The Gearing 1 in 10. This was on the list last week. So last week when we talked about it, it hit the list because it was up to $20 to $50. Well, by this point, it was up to $100 to $120 for raw copies. Now it's a $60 to $90 book. 9.8s run around $200. So I thought this was going to be a big trap, that was way too much. But it's still holding pretty good value. It's down a little bit, but it's still holding pretty good value. So definitely more of an I'll be back. But everybody's loving this last Ronin series, even though I think the second issue is supposed to come out this week. Did it come out this week? I forget. So anyway, with that, we're going to move on to Batman Adventures Continue #2. This is the first appearance of Sunny, which is kind of why people were jumping on this, and you're like, who's Sunny? She is the assistant, or an assistant to Deathstroke. This is the first appearance also of Deathstroke in the kind of the Batman the Animated Universe series, kind of his introduction, and we get his, in this series is his introduction. We get him and this Sunny character that's helping him out. Back then, this book jumped up to a $20 to $40 book. Now it's a $5 to $10 book. Although I will say, as recently as December, it was still going for around $20. But it has definitely been falling slowly and then more rapidly here recently, falling back. 9.8s are still going $60 to $100. I think that's still a little bit based off of those December $20 sales as opposed to the $5 sales now. But this one's definitely turned into a bit of a trap. We haven't seen Sunny in the main DC universe yet. We don't know if they're going to use her again or if she was just kind of in this animated Adventures Continue series. And yeah, we don't know if we'll see any more of her or not. Next, we're moving on to Thor God of Thunder #6. Cameo of Null and the Necro Sword. Back then, this was a 9.6 hit 325. 9.6s were going for $325 to $350. Which is what 9.8s had been going for just a month before. Now a 9.6 is down around $200 to $250, so it's dropped back about $100. 9.8s are sitting in the $350 to $500 range. Raw copies are going for $100 to $150. So this has been an I'll be back. We're still in the middle of this King in Black series right now, although it's about to wrap up. I would guess all this Null stuff, depending on how this series ends, I would say in another 6 months might be a good time to actually, if you haven't gotten Null, might be the time to start thinking about it again. For now, it's still pretty hot, even though it has come back a little bit. With that, we're going to move on to Venom #27, the 1 in 100 John Boy Myers variant. But this is even more special than that because this is the Air double cover version of that. So apparently there was a bunch of these 1 in 100s that were sent out with a double cover. Nobody knew how many for sure, if it was all of them or part of them or whatever, but there was enough of them that back then raw copies of this were going for $500 to $800 because new character codex plus this cool Air, people were all over it. We've come to find out codex isn't quite as new a character as what we thought, but this book is still going pretty well. If you manage to get it at release for an appropriate price, like you got it for the 1 in 100 price, typically it's now at $200 to $350 books, which is really good for a 1 in 100 for raw. 9.8s are going $500 to $700, but nowhere near what it was going when people were first chasing it. The Air, I guess there's enough of them out there that it hasn't been able to sustain where it was at, but it's still going for big money, just not those values that when it first hit the market and people realized it existed. So with that, we're going to go into Immortal Hulk #2. The fourth print, First Dr. Fry. This book has been on and off the list several times over the last couple of years, although we hadn't seen an Immortal Hulk book for a while. This hit the list because basically we got a solicitation that Dr. Fry was coming back into the story for the first time since issue number 2. So this jumped back up to a $30 book. 9.8 was going for $60. It's now a $1 to $20 book, which is kind of a weird wide range to say for raw copies, but literally there was a couple auctions that went for like $1 something plus shipping, but there was also a couple of buy now sales for $20. So, and there was a little bit of everything in between. Most of the sales were around $10. No surprise, I guess, in the middle there. But 9.8 of this can be had for around $50. So this book is another one that's down. This fourth print hasn't really sustained prices, and this Dr. Fry character really just hasn't been used very much. Next up, we have War of the Realms, New Agents of Atlas, number 1, the third print. This has got a bunch of first appearances in it, and there's been a lot of spec about this book being, these characters being used at some point down in the MCU. So back then, this book was $45 to $60. Now it's up to $50 to $80, so up a little bit, $250 to $350 for a 9.8 of this third print. And this has everything, has everything to do with just recently, Kevin Feige again kind of led credence to the rumors that they were going to try to make a show out of this. So this book has continued to go up, despite it being the third print. I would rather have the first personally, but apparently people are loving these second, third, fourth prints, in the last year or so. They've really taken off. Next we have Ultimate Comics, Spider-Man number 1, the Pincelli 1 in 15, the second appearance of Miles Morales. This book back then was raw copies were going for $500 plus. Now raw copies can be had for $250 to $400. 9.8s are running $1,200 to $1,500. So this one's for raw copy. It was down a little bit from where it was. Everything Miles is down just a little bit from kind of the summertime peaks when Miles Mania was at its height. But yeah, everything's kind of dropped back a little bit, but still definitely a good value, lots of value in this book, and it's still a lot of interest in Miles. So next, we're going to have a couple of Kamala Khan books. First up, we have all new Marvel Now .1, number 1, the first full appearance of Kamala Khan. Back then, a 9.8 hit 950, which was a record, and that's kind of what prompted this to be on the list. Right now, raw copies can be had for on average around $100. Do be careful with this book. There's a lot of beat up copies of this. It's hard to find a high grade copy of this raw. 9.8 still running at $800 to $1,000. So it's been pretty steady really over the last 6 months. You can actually get there are deals out there for a little bit less. But overall, this book's been pretty steady. We know we have casting news on her now. We know the show is coming, so my guess is this book is going to stay pretty steady until we maybe get the show, and then it'll probably jump again. Our next Kamala Khan related book is Captain Marvel 17, the second print. This is her second cameo appearance inside, but this is the reason this book is hot is because it's also her first cover appearance. Back then, this second print was a 9.8 was going for $3,000 to $3,500. This book is surprisingly actually backed off a little bit. I was a little surprised to see this. 9.8's now running $2,000 to $2,500. Although there was one sale mixed in amongst these for $3,250. But for the most part, this book has dropped back a little bit. So if you got that kind of money and really want this book, now it's probably a better time to get it than any time recently, and probably any time going forward once that show drops or we get a trailer. Next, we have Vengeance number 1, the first appearance of America Chavez. We know she's been cast in the Doctor Strange movie. Back then, it was just rumors that caused it to hit the list, but raw copies were going for $120. 9.8s were going for $800. And now we're basically in that same range. Another book that's been pretty steady. Raw copies are costing anywhere from $80 to $150, which is a pretty wide range for raw copies. But 9.8s, $650 to $900, also a pretty wide range. But this book is staying in those same areas, doing really well. We know another character we know is coming to the MCU at some point, that has been cast. So yeah, so looking forward to seeing what she brings to Doctor Strange and Multiverse of Madness if we ever get Marvel movies again. Hopefully soon. Next, we have Fallen Sun, The Death of Captain America #3. And this hit the list because this is the first time the two Hawkeyes, Clint Barton and Kate Bishop, are on the cover of a book together. So people are specking on this with the Hawkeye show for they're paying $15 for this on average. There's no real key here. It's just the two of them on the cover. I feel like this is kind of a made up key. They'd actually but I don't know. Anyway, but it's down. It's only a $5 to $15 book. We know the show's coming. We know both of them are going to be in it. I'd rather have Kate Bishop's first appearance or something like that, but I guess it's kind of a cheap spec. I feel like there's some other covers that might be better if I was chasing them, but hey, it's only $5 to $15, so it wasn't really much of a trap if you chase this for $15. It's still kind of, but you can definitely find it for less. And last is the first appearance of Kate Bishop, Young Avengers #1. We've talked about this book repeatedly and often on this list. This is the second week in a row that we've talked about it. I think it recently hit the list again. And yeah, back then a 9.8 was hitting $500. 9.6s were $250. Now it's $100 to $150 book raw. 9.8 is still in the $400 to $500 range. So maybe it's backed up a little bit, but it's been pretty steady. I mean, over the last 3 years, this book has been a roller coaster. It's kind of steadied out at this point in that $400 to $500 range for a 9.8. 100-ish for raw. My guess is if this shows a hit, this book will probably have a higher ceiling, but there must be a bunch of them out there because it really has struggled to ever jump beyond this kind of range. And it gets to the $400 to $500 range and then it drops back to a $300 to $400 book. Then it goes up and back. So I do wonder just how many of these are out there and how easily it is to attain. Maybe that's holding it back a little bit. But if the show's a hit and she does a great job, I expect this book will be close to $1,000 book by this time next year. But we'll see. So that's this week's list. We had a lot of books that dropped back. Even the books that kind of were steady were down a little bit. But there's definitely some good books in here as well. So I want to thank you guys for watching, and we'll catch you next time.